The next panel will focus on this discussion. How can we innovate to make the justice systems more people-centered while bringing technology to enhance them? What works and what does not work? Sam Muller, CEO at HiiL and moderator of this next session, will propose some of the questions to the speakers for the next 40 minutes. Please join the debate. Sam Muller, good morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be here. And I want to start by paying tribute to the Portuguese presidency for the leadership that was taken to organize this. I really hope that this could become an annual gathering and that we'll be able to take some of the ideas that come up further somehow, because that's needed. We already had a big justice delivery challenge in the EU, and as we've heard from previous speakers, even in the world. But the current situation we're all in has made that challenge even bigger. And we need to come up with solutions and ways to solve that more urgently than ever. We cannot build better without justice systems that deliver what people need. Now, this conference is special because it brings such a wide diversity of people and organizations together. It's also special because it's not another technology-driven program full of smart digital IE stuff of what might be possible without a sense of how to make it happen. It's a smart combination with people-centered justice at the core, because that is what we need. Technology to help make it happen, because that is an essential enabler. Now, we at HiiL were very humbled when Secretary of State Annabella Pedroso asked us to organize this part of the program, focused on people-centered justice and innovation. And this panel that will start in about 5 minutes will kick it off. Our Director of Research, Maurits Barendrecht, will then do a keynote on better justice. What is that? And are we delivering it? And after that, we'll let successful innovators tell their story and hopefully draw some conclusions from that. How can we help them, those justice game changers, fly and scale and deliver what is needed? That's the question. We end our part of the program with a keynote from one of the world's leading thinkers on justice innovation, Professor Gillian Hadfield. She will do that by video. Now let's turn to our panel. On 20 October last year, 22 ministers of justice came together for 90 minutes. They were convened by the Minister of Justice of Canada and the partners of the Pathfinders for Justice, a group of member states of the UN that focuses on SDG 16. And these ministers were asked to share what they were doing and what was worrying them in the current crisis. Now, for me, the simple fact that that meeting happened in itself was an innovation. We pushed very hard for it. All the ministers shared experiences about moving more justice support and delivery online. They spoke of digital signatures, online applications, online hearings, mobile paying of fines, online mediation, electronic case files, online registration, 24/7 helplines, and more. The Minister of Justice of Belgium spoke of a giant leap to build a single digital platform for citizens in which they could interact with the whole justice system. Now, one side of me was very happy to hear this. Something is clearly shifting towards online, digital, and simplification. But another side of me was worried because I heard very little about the root causes and the fundamentals in those presentations. And frankly, it would not be all that helpful, in my view, if the existing justice systems would be captured in digital stone. We've heard it a number of times. There is undeniable evidence that on the whole, justice systems of the world, also in the EU, are not delivering what they should and what they could. That despite the promise of Sustainable Development Goal 16. Resolution rates are, on the whole, not that impressive, around a third, 30%. Many experts feel they will further decrease with demand for justice services up as a result of the pandemic. Less than 5, maybe 7% of people with problem lose lawyers. NGO-supported services are also serving a relatively small percentage of people. Only some government-supported community courts have a market share of around 20%. And the prevention of justice problems hardly gets attention. In health terms, what we see is that the existing justice treatments and the delivery models for those treatments are just not delivering enough and reaching enough people. These are not systems you want to digitize. We need to innovate first. Look at the fundamentals and examine the systems themselves. We heard yesterday from Trevor Farrow, from Richard Susskind and others, Maaike de Lange, we need a transformation to people-centered justice. Justice that resolves people's justice problems, prevents injustices, large and small, from occurring, and creates opportunities for people to fully participate in their societies and economies. If we move to tech without looking at the fundamentals, we will technologize something that isn't working well. And the users are telling us where they think it can improve. More prevention, less adversarial, easier to access, easier to understand, faster. There's even a recent initiative to add 6 new fundamental rights to the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU on truth, on globalization, on AI, and on digital self-determination. The current crisis presents a tremendous opportunity, horrible as it may sound, on the back of so much suffering. The case for transformation is easier to make than ever. We face a double challenge, and Richard Susskind spoke about it really well yesterday. First, we have to innovate the fundamentals of justice systems themselves to make them more people-centered. And that's not primarily a tech challenge. It's about having data about the justice needs and experiences that people have. It's about having data on what works to deliver justice for the most pressing justice problems to people around family, employment, having an SME, housing, neighbors, crime, and more. It's about combining that data and to develop game changers that can deliver what is needed to as many people as possible. Easy to use and easy to understand. It's about bringing leaders together to create the enabling environment to make that happen, because that environment is now not there. A justice market that is open, innovative, and that can deliver access to justice for all, just like most health markets in Europe can deliver both innovation and access for all. The EU has been good at shaping markets, and I think it is a strength that can be built on. The second challenge is to bring technology in while this is happening, to support the change. That will inevitably require public-private collaboration. What does the government need from the private sector, and what does the private sector, broadly defined, need from the government? That's what this panel is about. And we have 2 amazing speakers to help us look into this question. Toñis Saar, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Justice of Estonia, one of the countries in the world that is furthest ahead on e-government. And Dr. Renko, the CEO of ARAG, one of the largest legal insurance companies. Toñis and Renko, thank you very much for being with us. Now, as I said, we face a double challenge. How can we avoid that we digitize the justice systems that are in many ways not delivering all that well? And how can we innovate the systems themselves to make them more people-centered while also bringing in technology to support and enhance that? What, in your view, works and what does not? Toñis, can I give you the floor on the first question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. And And first of all, let me thank for the presidency and you as well of putting that panel together, as well as the overall topic, digitalization of justice, brought to the highly in the agenda. I think we more than appreciate that with a very simple reason, because in Estonia we are struggling to make our processes digitalized in the justice area. And we feel that we have been left behind in the justice area. The rest of the government is developing faster than we do. And support from the Commission side, as well as the other member states, is more than happy to hear that. And as I can hear, it brings up more and more discussions, and it is definitely the topic which will not go away and will stay with us for many years. But back to the questions, I think you put very rightly that how should we avoid digitalizing the bad systems? I think the most tricky part of that question is the second part, because for me, funnily enough, not a lawyer, not a technician, and not the IT guru, but most difficult in my everyday life is to really make people to understand, does the processes actually perform as they should perform? People keep saying that they are written in the laws, especially in the juridical area, that most of the processes are stated in the laws. How can they be bad? Let's digitalize them. At the same time, they have been developed by our own policymakers. Our own parliament have been approved. How all these processes can be bad? Let's digitalize them. And some of the processes are already built into the technology. And as I keep saying that, if you take the law or regulation and give it to the IT guys and say, just put it into the computer, funnily enough, they do it. And it doesn't function properly. It's very costly, and it has a lot of legacy for nowadays. So in everyday life, what we do is try to understand, does our processes really function as they should function, taking it up, but we do have technology available. And it's the biggest part of that work, basically. The first answer usually is, okay, technology makes things faster, really. If we try to still today make the horse running faster, we probably wouldn't have a car. We can beat the horse up, we can put the technology around it, but we don't have a car, which we still measure with the horsepowers. Advantages technology is not only technology itself, but it is really how you use it and how you bring innovation in. And you have to basically, what we have doing now in Estonia is that we take the processes away from their owners, and we call it enrichment. If necessary, we bring it up on the management level. If necessary, we bring outside people in to see how this process really should go along if we put it into as an e-service. And then we will see it together with the law and enforcement, and how much do we actually need to regulate it around it in order to protect people, in order to protect the human rights. Policy owners, usually what they say at, okay, we put things into the laws because we need to protect people. Fine. But how the bad service protects people? How we can assure access to that service if we define all these pieces and spaces, what we should do behind the computer, when we should do, where to click, what we should choose, how does it protect the citizen if he doesn't even understand the question anymore? What they do want, they want to get the access to the courts. They want to get to the access to the lawyers. They want to get to the access to the basic legal services. But if we ask 120 questions before that, and half of them are not understandable, it doesn't protect anyone. Even first, it really delegates the responsibility and authority to the people and citizens, not to the state itself. So if you put the two things together on the table, the policy, law and regulation, as well as service itself, how it looks like, then you have a totally different domain answering that question. And then you start realizing, okay, we make things overcomplicated. We put the processes too complicated. In private sector, it's totally different. Sometimes private sector don't want the citizens to access to their services and service desks. But in a public sector, we can't afford that. We have a question back on us. Again, if we think of 20 years ago, we had a business register. There was a person who was filling out the paper and stamped it and said, okay, this is official document which says who is the owner of that business. When we digitalized that paper, instead of giving out 10,000 pieces of data every year, we gave out 20,000. But if we change the process and get the people to access the business register, today we have 9 million requests. So basically, you have to think of what the service is, what people do want. They want to trust your system. They want to get information out of that. They want to use that information, and that's how we try to treat all our processes in the court, etc., etc. So we prototype things. We during the law development process, we already try to prototype it. Even if it's a piece of paper, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be asking in some IT developer to design something clickable. It's just how does it look like in real life. Also, what is very important for us is microservices. I mean, we need to get rid of the understanding that the court system is one very big information system. Now, it should be maybe hundreds of microservices, and it changes a lot. It should change a lot. Of course, human rights, access, all principles should be there, but microservices is something what we are looking for. It should be agile. We want today one thing, tomorrow something different. Why is that? Because Europe is developing, partnering countries are developing. We need to exchange data. We need to build up bridges. And it is agile. We have to think data every time. It's not a picture. It's, to my understanding from previous speakers, signature is a very bad thing. It contains stuff. It should be there. It's accepted authorities, etc., etc. But if you put something in the container and sign it, you automatically lose some of the potential of the data out there. And moving the data, we have to think also all the time, also multilaterally. I mean, I think the Commissioner of Reinders and Minister of Justice of Germany mentioned both eCodex and eCodex has been setting the agenda for past 2 days already. It is a cornerstone, but we have to start thinking that how we exchange the data through the eCodex. We have to start thinking at how we give access of different electronic files across the borders. How to trust the different registries in different countries, not moving the data over, but how to get the hit or not hit services around. This is the future, and this is 10,000 against 9 million issue. And then we talk about the better services. Data and using the data in our country means basically more data, more requests, and better service means more users. And we should not be afraid of that. I would stop here at this moment if you allow me.
Thank you very much, Toñis. That is fascinating. So you mentioned just quickly 2 different domains to distinguish: the policy domain and what the service actually looks like. We shouldn't overcomplicate. And some really interesting things about what people want: trust, access. They want to understand it. They want to make sure that the procedure you have actually does what it's supposed to do. Agility. And you keep saying the importance of data and having data, using data, and making sure that it can be used to constantly improve things. Thank you so much. Over to you, Renko. What do you think we could do to both innovate and use technology at the same time?
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you very much for having me. And I noticed that you stumbled a little bit by introducing myself when you mentioned that it's a legal insurance company, something like this. So maybe not everybody is knowing where I'm coming from. So I would like to give a very brief introduction what actually a legal expense insurance company is. We were founded 85 years ago when the grandfather of our current owner had the idea that everybody should be able to assert their rights, regardless of the financial situation. And the solution back then was an insurance solution. The insurance solution to help the weaker person, the financially weaker person, to be on the same level in a discussion, in a dispute, as the person on the other hand of this issue, no matter of the financial circumstances, whether it's a big institution or a private citizen. And we built this on solidarity and on the principles of pooling of risks, of course. We're now doing business in 19 countries in Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, and we have more than 4,300 employees. A lot of these, of course, are lawyers, and they render legal services or just cost coverages for legal proceedings. And of course, this leads to the question mainly how to finance legal proceedings. And I think there's a lot of potential in making access to justice just a little bit cheaper to lift the burden of financing. But I would like to point today maybe in a different direction, in the direction of, we have the word in German Schwellenangst. Schwellenangst. This describes the fear of the doorstep, the psychological barrier to enter a room, for example, or to enter a certain social setting. And of course, this leads to the question that we need to build institutions, that we need to build a legal system that is, of course, based on certain valuable principles, and that is approved by experts, but not only accessible by experts and insiders. So they do not have to be fond of this system alone. They do not have to say this is working fine, but it has to be accessible for the everyday person. And actually right now the illegal industry, the court system does a lot to impress, to show the subject authority, to show power, and of course for good reasons. But of course at the same time this actually foster the already mentioned Schwellenangst. If you ask a 5-year-old to draw a picture of a courtroom, I think this child is gonna paint a picture with a high bench, with a lot of respect, with a lot of distance. A picture of authority. But of course, authority has to be in place because the ruling needs to have authority, but at the same time, of course, this authority is intimidating. It's intimidating, and intimidating also means that it's not accessible. And in these times, everybody's afraid of divided societies. I think we have to make sure that also from a psychological standpoint, a court system, a legal system is accessible. And that is why I think somebody who's focusing on customer behavior, the private sector, who's focusing on customer value, on the objective value, on the subjective value, and focusing on customer experience, I think should play a bigger role in outlining the principles and maybe even the technical environment of this legal system. So one speaker mentioned that lawyers have not been mentioned the whole day until now. And I would like to say that the end user, the citizen, has not been mentioned until Sam has started his introduction. And we need to build a legal system that is not only better for lawyers and not only better for the institutions, but that is better and more accessible for citizens. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Renko. Wow, what a journey, 85 years to where you are now. And I like that term, Schwellen Angst. I will remember that, fear of the doorstep. And it's absolutely true. I don't think you even need to ask a 5-year-old. Probably most 30-year-olds will answer the same thing. High bench, authority, intimidating, not accessible. Customer value and experience and behavior should be the foundation of how we build legal systems. That is what lies before us, and that's where we can use technology. Okay, let's take that as a foundation. We talked about policies and what they actually do. We talked about putting the user at the center. Renko, your company represents a really interesting business model or a value proposition that could perhaps do a lot more. One of the things that we've seen in our work with innovators is that it's pretty hard for a lot of the new ideas that are out there to scale. Somehow the financial, regulatory, and other environment is not that conducive. And it's interesting when you compare that to the health sector. The Economist only 2 months ago had a leading article on the incredible amount of investment that was going into e-health as a result of COVID. But you don't really read anything about investment into eJustice as a result of COVID. So there is something there that isn't entirely working. So let me ask the two of you, and maybe I can start with you, Toñis. What does government need, and what would you see as a Secretary General of the Ministry of Justice that the private sector could do to help move towards this people-centered justice vision and to actually make it work, get some game changers to really change in some combination? And then I'll go to you, Renko, and ask you, what would you as a private sector person want from the government? Toñis, to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Muller. I was thinking quite a lot this morning over that question, actually. It's not really easy to answer. First of all, I think you pointed right. There are not much discussions about that, how much money is flying into the justice area if we talk about the developing justice system. And it's everywhere like that. I mean, home affairs, even on an EU level, you have internal security fund, but you don't have a internal or a justice program in digitalization. And I think the commissioners and future presidency and current presidency probably works hard on it, and that to create that, and it's very, very much important. I think the resources, you have to devote resources. I think the second part of it is that not many countries actually have the very strong IT departments and developers or the process owners who understand the IT in the justice area. I think that's something should be created as well. My first move actually coming to the office is also take the specific IT advisors for myself. You need these people, not only lawyers. I mean, these silos need to be just broken down. The second part of it is really, if you talk about the health sector, the data there is very sensitive, but the services might not be. In a justice area, for example, if we all go to the grocery store and try to order something online and it doesn't work, we choose the different shop. I mean, we different service provider. But if a justice part is not working, it hits the trust very, very hardly. I mean, this makes us more conservative than the other areas of the government, definitely. And cooperating with the private sector, we have a lot of cooperation there. But most of the times we have to make them to understand that we cannot fail. I mean, we cannot delegate the responsibility to the private sector developer. If the land register doesn't show your name under your land, then at the end of the day, nobody cares what the name of the IT company is. I mean, the trust of the government is under the state. Same things is actually controlling the data, giving access to the data. Private sector is extremely good on profiling. targeting people, finding out the people, having these tools. But we have limits, and we expect that these limits are discussed politically and debated publicly. And sometimes it takes time, and it's very necessary for the human rights perspective that these limits are debated. Technology allows more than we actually can afford today or are willing to afford today. It's very, very interesting. We're discussing very heavily data retention and telcos, but we don't have any problem of discussing of giving health certificates people in order to access to the football game. I mean, these are the discussions we should be having publicly, but it also have two options. First, it hinders some of the traditional government policies, but at the same time, if the decision comes, there is a huge expectation that changes will happen fast. So what we ask from the private sector usually is the more agile you can be, the more flexible you can be, the more you can give us the hourly code writing, not the whole big system and control over it. So we need a lot of agility, as well as supporting with the technology, transcription, interpretation, translation, recognition, connection, finding out things, automatization. These things are really, really important. But we cannot, at the end of the day, let the AI, for example, run wildly and not having a control over it on making the court decisions on behalf of us. But again, in a justice system, even in Estonia, we are way behind where we can actually be, and definitely the public expectation is way higher than we can actually afford today. So as I mentioned before, we have a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one quick follow-up question. If you talk about this importance of data about what people want and what they need, does, for example, your ministry or other Ministry of Justice, have capacity to actually constantly collect that data, use that data? Is it integrated into the management systems? Because that's probably where it starts, right? That's where the users are in that data.
We do have a capacity, but I would say it's not even the tip of the iceberg. There are two things. First, the overall management and filing systems are not interconnected, and they should be, so that we actually move the data from police to the prosecutor's office to the courtroom, etc., etc. So now we at the moment moving the files, but at the end of the day, if you are a prosecutor or whoever in the system who tries to find out something, we had a small kind of the test or a game. So if you have a small tablet with a Mickey Mouse on it, and at the end of the day, the computer could find and understand that this Mickey Mouse tablet of small narcotics has been ended up 72 times in different areas of Estonia, as well as the 42 countries all over the world, which has the same code. So that's the value, what no other prosecutor or no other judge could even think of. I mean, there is a technology where people sort of start understanding it. Okay, that's something which you can't do with the paper files. So we're trying to find out the ways to work with the data, but I think our biggest challenge today is getting the transcription and interpretation right. I mean, online interpretation, because we're getting more and more, international cases. And those things are, the key focus at this point. It will have a lot of effects and can reduce the timing, what we use in the courts, and human interpretation, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the areas we were really working on.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Renko, let's turn to you. What do you need, and companies like you, what would you need from the governments?
Yeah, well, I would like to start with we need more people in charge like Toñis. I will definitely watch the recording of your statement at the beginning again after today's conference. But besides that, I think what we need is, of course, we need innovation. But for innovation, of course, we need freedom. I think that innovation was never created in a system which is dominated by a monopoly. And currently, of course, the justice system is on the end user part very much dominated by the monopoly of bar associations, of lawyers. And I think a little bit more freedom there would give as well some more ways to act for legal text, for example. Sam, you just mentioned that there's not that much money flowing into eJustice, but of course there's a lot of capital in the so-called legal tech area. And one of the obstacles of this industry always is the very strong monopoly in the different legislations. Secondly, I think that the world should become a little bit more like Scandinavia and Estonia. I think we need a generally accepted and an easy to use and still secure login process, which we do not have currently. Every business is building its own login process, but we need a government, we need a legal system which is digitally accessible, and not only in writing, but actually, because it is easy to use. It's not worthwhile to have something which is digitally accessible, but nobody uses it because it's too complicated and just not user-friendly. And last but not least, I think it would be worthwhile to include other players in this discussion as well, to include players which are customer orientated, which have a different view on the legal system. And I think everybody could benefit from such discussions.
Wow, fantastic, Renko. Well, I've been asked to wrap up, but let me just try and see if I can capture the core of what was said. The wonderful thing about this panel is that we totally agree and are totally aligned how important it is to put people at the center, and that the end user is the beginning and the end of it all. A couple of things about the end user came up: trust, easy to access, easy to understand, and somehow that whatever we design in the justice system actually does for the users what it's supposed to be doing. And to remove the Schwellenangst, I love that word. Let's hold on to that. In order to do that, the market needs to be changed. It needs to be a slightly different market that is more open, that allows other players in, that is perhaps also slightly more agile. The private sector needs a good lock-in process. And that's interesting because I don't think that exists in most countries. Something that the private sector could lock into and use. With that, I think we have a few things that we could take with us and hopefully develop either in this conference or at follow-up, because this is all very important. I want to thank you, Toñis. I want to thank you, Renko, for this. I want to thank the audience for listening to us, and I will hand back to the facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you very much.